Measured, controlled, systematic, prepared. These are words that represent the ethos and the working manner of both Sean and myself. It is the practical application of these words that has seen the Just Lawful project come to life and deliver the episodes and content in the format that we have so far. The question here then is this: how does this play out then when those who enjoy their creative control actively decide to take it out of their own hands? Quite simply, you get this. An episode where Sean and Daniel are merely passengers in the buffet car on this recklessly off-the-rails runaway train. We said we were giving control over to you, the audience, and thank you to those who sent in your questions and have dictated the stations we're going to pull into and which ones we're steaming straight past. It goes without saying that you know the rules, kids. You've purchased your ticket. We're nervously standing on the platform and the conductor is shouting, "All aboard," as we pull out of the station on this, our first Ask Sean Anything episode on Just Lawful.
Adelaide is the perfect place to set a horror story. You know why all those films and books are always set in sleepy conservative towns? Because sleepy conservative towns are where those things happen. Exorcism, omens, shining, poltergeists. Adelaide is Amityville or Salem, and things here go bump in the night.
Welcome again to Just Lawful, where things do indeed go bump in the night. My name is Daniel Panozzo, and I am once again joined by my co-host, and for this episode, more than any other, the man in the hot seat, Sean Fuster.
Well, look, Daniel, what could be more appropriate than coming out of lockdown here in Adelaide, South Australia, into something so completely out of my control? I'm so excited. It's not nervous terror you hear in my voice, not at all, and I'll sue anybody who says differently.
Well, you say that now. We'll see how we go by the time we get to the end of this episode, Sean. I put this one out there a while back, and I put this to you. I said, hey, this would be a great idea down the track. Let's get some content under our belt first, and then let's mix it up, and let's give the control over to our audience, those who listen to us, and say, what do you actually want to know?
And when you said that, I thought, sure, in year 2.
Not so much. Not in year 2.
Hey, dear.
Firstly, before we go any further, a huge thank you to everyone who is listening. If you haven't heard our previous episodes, look, we'd strongly recommend and greatly appreciate you heading straight over to iTunes or Spotify. Please subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating. That's how you can help us get our work out to the masses. If you like what you hear, that is the best way that you can help us get to more ears and get more people listening to the sort of the work and the content we're giving out, including this one here. This one's going to be somewhat different. Normally, it's me who asks Sean about all his experiences, his memories, through the lens of a particular crime that he's covered.
Saves me on therapy bills.
Indeed. In this episode, as I said, we're handing the steering wheel over, and people, you out there, get to take us wherever we need to go. So
probably going to cost me therapy bills.
Absolutely. Look, for the last few weeks, I've asked our audience, please, what do you want to know about Sean? Send them through. It doesn't matter what they are. We had some caveats on there, obviously, if there's a legality situation. And I must say, looking through, and I'll put it out there now, Sean hasn't seen these questions.
No.
He doesn't know what he's in for.
No.
I do. That's why I'm smiling, and that is nervous sort of quivering you can hear in Sean's voice.
Smiling is too small a word for what you're doing right now. I've seen sharks with smaller rows of teeth.
Absolutely. I prefer Cheshire Cat, but I'll go with Jaws. That works just as well. All right, so our aim here is to get to as many of these as we can, totally dependent on how juicy your questions are and how much information I can squeeze out of Sean off the back of those. So, Sean, I was almost going to say any last words, but any last-minute reservations before we kick off?
Look, not really. As much as I'm having fun with this, and I've been having fun with this on social media, I really appreciate everybody sending in these questions. I hope you get the answers you want.
Look, if you don't, let us know. That's fine too. And look, we thought we'd kick off this concept as an Ask Sean Anything. We're going to have a crack at this. Let's see what happens. If you really like this and there's an appetite for it, and if we don't get through all these questions, hey, look, we might circle back in a while and do it and Ask Sean Anything too. Let's see how we go. Sean Fuster, are you ready?
I am ready, Daniel Panozzo. I am as ready as I'll ever be for
this. All right, so let's kick off. First question comes in from Phil. Now, a bit of setup and context for this, so I'll cover that and then we'll get your response, Sean. Phil wants to ask about foreign laws overriding Australian federal and state laws, and in particular it's in regard to the voluntary assisted dying laws that we have here in Australia. Phil cites a case where an elderly man in Victoria who was eligible had his request to access the voluntary assisted dying was denied at the last minute as he was housed within a Catholic nursing home. Because it was Catholic, that's an exception. All right. Now, they wouldn't allow that to happen. In this instance, his family were able to relocate him out of the home. He did pass away peacefully in hospital with his family around him. So, not exactly how he wanted it. However, he got the outcome. Phil's concern, and the reason, and the question he sort of asks is, how is it that the Vatican can overrule the laws of our states and country with their Good Samaritan ideal, if you like? In context for this, with the recent South Australian euthanasia bill having amendments which are allowing exemption for Catholic institutions, he wants to know how this foreign ideal may overrule the laws of our land, or how can they? Before you answer that, he also says he loves listening to Sean's stories, the show format, and the intro, which is great. Nice. And he says, keep up the good work. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. So, Sean, with this here, short answer is it can, because that's the way the laws are written. But I think there's more to this question.
There is. And Phil, thank you for asking this, and thank you for enjoying the show. It's not actually the Vatican that's overruling this.
Right.
It's actually Australian law. So there is anti-discrimination laws in place in South Australia, in Australia, and you can't force religious organisations to do something that is against their beliefs. However, that comes with caveats. And let's talk about private schools for a minute.
Yeah.
Private schools, all boys schools, all girls schools. How can you possibly have an all boys school and an all girls school in 2021?
Yeah, that's right.
The answer is these organisations have to actually apply to the courts for an exemption from the equal opportunity laws. Similar thing with defence companies. I covered a case years ago where a defence company based out at Edinburgh near the RAAF base, out where you and I both grew up, wanted to apply to be exempted from having to hire people from China or of Chinese backgrounds.
Right.
They said there was the potential for that to be a security risk.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, they might have a family member who works for foreign intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. Sure, it's a long bow to draw, but they said they couldn't get contracts from American defense companies unless they had that exemption.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's always an exemption. And it's not that the Vatican is saying, well, Catholic dogma must have primacy over Australian law. It's Australian law recognising that there are some things in the Catholic dogma that won't match up with the laws, so you can't be forced to do it.
Yeah.
And that's really where it comes from. And
that was kind of what I was saying. So it's written into the law, and we get that. Although we have the ideal of separating church and state, we understand that that's a murky area.
It's a murky area, and it's fair to say that a lot of times the separation for church and state goes in the church's direction, not always in the state's direction.
Yeah. I've got a bit of an extension from that. I kind of want to draw this out a little bit on Phil's question. So do we consider that this is right? That you and I, from our personal opinion, and this is not anyone or anything, any of that, do we personally, and you in particular, personally feel that that is okay for that aspect to have religious sort of institutions, if you like, to have that exemption?
I'm okay with it so long as there is an alternative.
Okay.
If you're going to say that the Church of the Frozen Banana Peel doesn't believe in euthanasia, and therefore any hospital that's connected to the Church of the Frozen Banana Peel will not take part in voluntary assisted dying, that's fine with me so long as somewhere else there is available a hospital that will provide that.
Okay.
The moment you have a situation where only one set of dogma, doctrine, political beliefs assumes primacy and there's no alternative, well, that's a dictatorship or a theocracy.
Okay.
We don't want to see that happen.
No.
So to put it in a very Adelaide context, if the Calvary Hospital doesn't want to do something, but the RAH is available, the Royal Adelaide Hospital, and the RAH is adequately funded with rooms and beds and surgeons and doctors available, then I don't have an issue with one hospital or one religious group saying, we're not going to be part of that.
Yeah, right. So if we consider that we have a law here in Australia that says we have access to voluntary assisted dying laws, how do we consider that if someone has that access yet that right is taken away because of this? Do we consider that a just versus a lawful consideration?
Yeah.
And this is where I wanted to bring this back to we talk about just versus lawful, and it is only our opinion in this. How do you consider that? Do you consider that just versus a lawful?
It's unjust. It's unjust.
Okay.
If someone, that gentleman that Phil was talking about who was in a Victorian home, if he hadn't been able to get out of that Victorian home in any way, shape or form, then it would definitely be unjust.
Okay.
It's also unjust because he lives there. It's his home.
Yep.
He's comfortable there, I'm assuming. His possessions are there. His family is, nearby. It's convenient for him. For him to lose the right to decide how he wants to painlessly die because of the situation in which he's living is really difficult for me. Yeah. Now, I went through religious schooling. I went to a school out in Gawler. It was heavily religious, and there were lots of things that we were told we could and could not do based on the religion of that school.
Sure.
The alternative, of course, was get up and go to the public school.
Yeah.
And that's why I said what I did about adequate funding, adequate resourcing, because the public school where I grew up didn't have those things. And so it would have literally been cutting your knees off in order to change schools.
Yeah.
In the case of this gentleman, was he put in a home that was just as comfortable, just as convenient, just as available? If so, then it's literally just.
Okay.
He's moving from one to another. But if there was a decline in the quality of his life in order to end his life, there's no justice in that.
So to summarise, if I could be so bold, we would say that yes, it's a lawful situation. In your eyes, because he has the alternative to the situation, it's a just outcome. If, however, there was no alternative to that, you wouldn't consider that a just situation.
That's right. I've always believed that true justice comes only when the rights of all people are respected.
Okay.
So in this situation, the rights of the nursing home to say, we are Catholic, we do not believe in this,
so we have
to
the
be
exemption.
Respected.
Yep.
But so do his rights as the person of, I deserve to live, I have a right to live in comfort, near my family, in a commensurate place, with the same amount of money, the same amount of resources.
And I also have the access to the voluntary assisted dying laws. That is also my right now,
exactly,
as governed by this. Pay. Okay.
It's one thing for the nursing home to say, you can't do that here, versus the nursing home to say, you can't do that at all.
At all, yeah. All right, lovely. Phil, thank you so much, mate. Appreciate that. We are off to a flying start. One down, Sean. How you feeling?
Yeah, so far so good.
So far so good?
Yeah, questions without notice. Working so far so good.
Let's see how that continues. Okay, Sean, one down. Good start. Let's rapid fire some questions. Let's get through a number of them.
Segment 2, the Steve O'Neill segment.
The Steve O'Neill segment. We'll get through a few of these really quickly. Belinda wants to know what your favourite food is, and where is your favourite place to eat in Adelaide?
Favourite place to eat in Adelaide is probably wherever you took me last, because you're the big foodie. But lately it's been the highway, on Anzac Highway.
Yes.
That's been a really good feed for us lately.
Yeah, Highway Inn has been a good one. That they have looked after us a couple of times recently.
Yeah, excellent ribs. Lately my favourite food is beef ribs.
Yes.
But all time it's probably got to be chips, as in potato chips.
Right.
Not in a packet, but like hot chips.
Hot chips, yeah.
Hot chips.
So not crisps from a packet,
no,
hot chips?
Absolute fiend for hot chips. But beef ribs are getting right up there.
Beef ribs are getting... There you go. So beef ribs are good. Hot chips are the business.
Yep.
And I can assure you, we're not getting a paid advert for this, but the Highway Inn.
But if the Highway wants to give me some ribs...
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. Got it. I agree. So... what's been your most rewarding experience that's come from your work?
Oh, that's a really hard one to answer, because globally,
yes,
it's giving voices to people that don't have them.
Okay.
And that's exemplified in so many different ways. Personally, it's when we're able to do something that changes the law as well.
Okay.
So something like the Masked Brothers, who, we not only I was not only able to help them amplify their voices.
Sure.
But by doing so, state law changed.
Yes.
And it meant that pedophiles could no longer get home detention sentences.
Okay.
So that's the ultimate, I guess. Yeah. The 1-2 punch of someone who hasn't been heard getting heard.
Sure.
And a law changing as a result.
Excellent. Got one here from an avid listener, Ben. Ben writes, given the concept of good versus evil is a human construct, and the very nature of humans is to categorise behaviours via social schemas so that they do not have to relearn conventions every day, he wants to know who would win in a fight between Starscream and Ultra Magnus in their vehicle forms. For those who don't know and are just gone, what the heck has Daniel just said? It's a Transformers comic sort of toy perspective. But Sean, the question stands: Starscream and Ultra Magnus in their vehicle forms, who wins?
Ultra Magnus, because even though he's a ground-based vehicle, he's still a better tactician than Starscream the jet could ever be.
Oh, there you go. Ben, you wanted to know, you've been told. I somehow feel that...
I can't believe that was there.
I somehow feel it doesn't matter what the answer is, Ben is going to dispute that. And
That's because he's a little goblin.
Yep. We know who Ben is. Avid listener, we know Ben, and I don't doubt that for a second. All right. Got a question here from a guy called Luke, who claims he's a long-time listener, first-time caller. Yes. Very clever, Luke. I'm sure you're a riot amongst all of your friends and family. But Luke asks this. During one of the Hillier triple murder episodes, Sean, you mentioned that there was a break of about a week between court sessions, and it got him wondering, what does that week look like for you, Sean? And further to that, how do you move on to covering something else during that time, given the same attention is deserved of that case, whatever you're doing, while still having this going on in the back end? So what does that process look like for you? Yeah.
Not being flippant here, I was one of the earliest diagnosed cases in the world of what they now call ADHD,
Okay.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. I honestly believe that's one of my strengths as a journalist. The fact that I can focus my attention in on something else and then switch channels to another and to another and to another. There are some days where I will work on one of these major cases, like a Hillier, in the morning, and then do 3 other cases that afternoon.
Right.
Or I'll spend time pre-writing something for later in the week or reading through documentation. It's just the nature of the beast. Seldom is a day just one case.
Okay.
Usually it's multiple cases, multiple phone calls, multiple different channels. In terms of how I do it, I don't really have a way of putting it into words. I just kind of do. So when something like Hillier finishes on a Monday and it doesn't come back to the following Monday, it's, all right, that's done. Let the bathwater out, as we've talked about.
Sure.
And move on to the next thing, because tomorrow I need to think about a death by dangerous driving case. Thursday I need to think about a rape case. Friday I need to think about an indecent assault. And you just switch.
Sure.
I think I'm very fortunate that I can do that without cheating anybody out of my attention, I guess.
Well, it's interesting. So from what you were just saying with the diagnosis of ADHD, etc., and the constant flow of content coming through in your role, it kind of almost sounds like you've got a concentrated attention span for that. It's like hyper focus on this one thing for now. Once that one thing's done, stop, switch that off, move that aside, hyper focus on the next thing almost.
Yeah, mentally to me, there's mechanical pencils where you've got the small lead and you take it off and you insert it into the bottom of the pencil and it pushes the next one up, those old ones.
The old school, yeah.
That's the way I sort of see it in my mind. It's okay, done with that story, move it to the bottom of the stack now. Here's the next one, write that one, take that one out, move it to the bottom of the stack again, and go through until eventually that very first bottom one comes all the way back up.
So it's almost an autonomous sort of prioritization almost, if you like.
Yeah, and it's not compartmentalization, because it's only at the end of the day that I stop and think about everything I've done. I mean, spoiler alert, we're here recording this late because of the whole COVID lockdown situation in South Australia. There's a story that's going to be breaking in tomorrow's newspaper, as I say this right now, that is quite big. I got details of that story at 4:00 in an afternoon and had to turn it around before deadline. Well, that's just the way it goes.
That was kind of the other part I was going to say to that. Apart from that sort of, I'll call it concentrated hyper-focus, the other piece, as you said, you might have that case on the Monday that might revolve around to the next Monday. You've got to front up and be aware of, as you said, you might have a dangerous driving, you then got a rape case, you've got something else in there, no doubt the amount of content you see, there's probably some tax avoiding ninjas in there, there's maybe some, doomsday cult aspect in there as well. What I mean is there's so much of that in your line of work that is a continual flow and revolving door almost of next case. It's not like, having seen how you work at times, it's not like you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs for too long on any given day. No,
and if you see me file 3 stories on the website of the Advertiser or in the Advertiser newspaper, there's probably 8 others that I've been to that haven't been stories that day, that I've just recorded down in our ongoing electronic diary, knowing I need to come back to them another time.
There you go.
The demand within my job is to produce the best story I can every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's 3 of those. Sometimes there's only 1 of those. Seldom is there none of them. But even if there's none, then I'm doing all that background work.
Yeah. Well, Sean, thank you for that. Luke, I hope that's a bit of a peek behind the curtain for you. I hope that got you what you wanted. Luke also says here, keep up the great work. I'm unsure if that's for you and me or just you, Sean. I'm sure Luke would be happy to let us know his thoughts about that.
We'll just have to hazard a guess as to what that is.
Absolutely. So from that perspective, I hope, as I said, that look behind the curtain, given a bit of a peek of your process for that. Next one is from Reese. Has a familiar flavour to it, that one. Sean, you might know who Reese is. Reese wants to know this. Have you ever been in court with some of Australia's biggest criminals? Now, I'm assuming he means by reputation and or grandiose crimes. However, I'm quite a literal person, as you know, Sean, and like to push the boundaries. So what about maximum density or space taken up, capacity perhaps? What about that?
In capacity, there's two. There's Peter Rex Dancy,
Okay.
who murdered his wife Helen by pushing her into a pond at Veal Gardens.
Yes.
He was certainly a large person.
Okay.
I was going to say gentleman, but there's nothing gentlemanly about murdering your wife.
No.
The other is one of the cases that, at time of recording, I'm doing a lot about, which is a man who decided he was going to blow up a school.
Right.
Because the children were annoying him.
Okay.
And he, is a rather large gentleman who turns up in court every day from prison in his mustard-coloured tracky dacks and jumper, ready to argue his own case, which is always a rough ask.
There's been some infamous people who have attempted that in the past.
What, the tracky dacks?
Well, I've seen many infamous people trying that at many shopping centres. No, I meant being their own counsel, and I think what's the old saying? If you
have yourself for a lawyer, you've got a fool for a client.
Exactly right. That's the one.
But back to Reese's actual question.
I was going to say that's a bit of fun.
Yeah.
In terms of notoriety, or I guess criminal sort of reputation, if you like.
Yeah.
Who are some of the big ones you've seen?
So there have been some of the bigger, more notorious members of outlaw motorcycle gangs,
Okay.
especially when some of the ones that have been famous interstate, like there was a gentleman by the name of Nick the Knife.
Mm-hmm.
He was involved in an Adelaide case for a
Sure.
while, so shared courtroom with him. Of course, the Bodies in the Barrels killers,
Yes.
Robert Joe Wagner and John Justin Bunting,
Mm-hmm.
spent a fair bit of time in court with them. Any of the ones that I've outlined in the book City of Evil, like Jean-Eric Gassy, the delusional psychiatrist who
Yes.
assassinated his former boss, Adelaide tends not to get the big names, though,
Yeah.
especially compared to Melbourne. In Melbourne, Andrew Rule and Sylvester, I can't think of his name,
Oh, I know
the
exactly.
guys that write the Underbelly
Yes.
series. I noticed today they run a weekly column, almost like a gossip column, about
Right.
what's going on with all the crims in Melbourne.
Okay.
You couldn't do that in South Australia. It's a smaller ecosystem,
Yep.
and none of the names are as well known.
No.
I tend to think of it, South Australia, you become well known for what you do, not who you are.
Yeah, sure.
We tend to remember the bizarre crime rather than the person. So in terms of most notorious, I don't think it gets any more notorious than the Bodies in the Barrels killers.
Okay.
Oh, apart from, of course, Bradley Murdoch.
Bradley Moore, for those who recognise the name but maybe not the crime.
Yep, Bradley Murdoch, who killed Peter Falcone up in the Northern Territory.
Mm-hmm.
Joanne Lees managed to escape. I was actually there when he was arrested for that crime because he was acquitted of a rape case in
Sure.
South Australia. And he was freed. I'll never forget this. He was freed from the dock. And as he was freed from the dock on this rape charge in the district court, the sheriff's officers and the Northern Territory coppers all leaped to arrest him. And the judge, Michael David, says, stop the court. You can't arrest somebody in a court of law. Mr. Murdoch, you're free to go. Well, Murdoch looked at the cops looked at Murdoch, and Murdoch, who's about 8 feet tall, Slender Man style, just like slinks sort of sideways out of court and bolts. And if you know the district court building, as you and I both do, the staircase goes directly from the 3rd floor to the ground floor.
Yeah, right.
So Murdoch legged it for the stairs, and you've got this absolute Keystone Cops situation of all these Territory coppers flowing out of the courtroom, chasing him down the stairs, as all the South Australian coppers who are stationed outside come flooding up the stairs. Murdoch gets caught in this pincer manoeuvre on the middle landing, looks side to side as if he's going to leap off. And if anybody's been to the old Charles Moore department store, which is now the district court building,
Yeah.
you'll know the staircase. They pincered him, turned him around, handcuffed him, frog marched him down the stairs. Later on, they brought him out the front, and they wanted the entire world to see they'd got him. So we were there,
right.
Johnny on the spot, when he got arrested officially for the murder of Peter Falcone.
Well, there you go, Reese. There's some names for you and some crimes around that. So, as you said, John, you have shared, and I actually don't even like saying shared the courtroom with them. It makes it sound like you're sitting buddy next to them. Of course, you're not.
Definitely not buddy.
No, absolutely. With that said, though, for Reese's benefit, there are some really big names that you've certainly shared there. And as you said, maybe not as well known notoriously as some of the criminals within maybe the eastern states of Australia, certainly in South Australia, and certainly in terms of their crimes, some absolute big names there.
Absolutely.
Sean, we've got a couple of questions here from superfan Jerry. Now, that's her words, not mine, but she's got a couple of questions. Firstly, Jerry wants to know, Sean, in your close to 20 years of court reporting, what percentage of cases would you say reach a verdict of being both just and lawful? Because listening to the show, it's easy to get a perception that the legal system does not always provide justice for victims. Is that more exception to the rule? And as the question is, what percentage of cases do you reckon gets a verdict which is both just and lawful?
So there's two answers to this question.
Oh, okay.
There's the percentage of cases that I see, and there's the percentage of cases that happen.
Right. Well, to be fair, actually, no, I'll refrain from that because I was going to say let's just focus on the ones that you see because that's your first-hand experience.
Well,
However,
can't. We can't.
I was going to say the other side to that is knowing you probably have the numbers and the understanding of what the entirety of even if you don't see them. So what happened? So I'm throwing the direction of this back to you. You run this, Sean.
Well,
what are you gonna do?
let me say it to you this way. What we see in court as reporters, we've always got to remember is the thinnest end of the wedge.
Okay.
We can't be everywhere.
Yep.
We are drawn to the cases that are the most bizarre, the most upsetting, the most shocking, or in my line of work, most often the ones that victims of crime approach us and say, please help us with this.
Okay.
So you're seeing the really nasty end of things.
Yeah, sure.
For every one of those, there would be an easy dozen that are just sailing on through with no attention whatsoever.
Okay.
If you look at the South Australian Appeals Court,
Right.
which is where judgments go to be reconsidered by brother judges, we know that in some years as many as 49% of all judgments that go before the appeals court are reversed, flipped in the other direction.
Well, that kind of puts a wrinkle in that as well, doesn't it?
It does. So if your outcome is just and lawful, you're looking at 50-50 split.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you've got to be looking at 50-50 split based on the numbers alone.
Now, hang on. I'm no mathematician, and I hate getting percentages because it always mixes me up. Are we looking at a 50-50 split, but then what percentage of that 50 that didn't go the way we wanted to go to appeals, and is that 50-50 from there? So are we down to 33%, 25%? How do percentages work in that sense?
I don't know, and I know that I haven't got a stone-cold chance of sacrificing myself for this one.
No, that's fair.
Look, to be quite, there's a lot of in-jokes in this episode. I'm really sorry. To be quite serious, of the ones that I personally see, I would suggest that the weighting is more toward correct outcomes.
Okay.
I hear less outcry than I would expect.
Right.
When the outcry happens, it's huge.
It's loud, yeah.
When something goes wrong, it goes cacophonically wrong.
Right.
I don't know if that's a word. I might have just invented it.
Possibly.
When it's right, it sails on through.
Okay.
People don't talk about. And this is something that Judge Terry Worthington, former Chief Judge of the District Court, used to talk about. He used to say, you only hear people complain about the courts when they really, really want to complain.
Yeah, right.
The rest of the time, the good work just goes through ignored. So for the benefit of all the judges that listen to this show and think that I'm just coming for you all the time, it's not the case.
It's about a 50-50 split, yeah?
49%.
Gotcha, right.
49%.
No, okay. No, we kid. We do appreciate every one of the law fraternity who tuned in to listen to us. Thank you very much. So you think more than usual it is what could be considered just and or lawful at that point?
Yeah, I think that the majority tips toward most outcomes being correct. That doesn't necessarily mean most laws are correct, and there might be a torturous path to get there.
Sure.
It may very well be that along the way to that outcome, someone feels they have been re-victimized. We certainly saw that during the Hillier case.
Yeah.
You know, you can't argue that the Hillier case didn't come to the correct lawful conclusion.
Yeah.
It just was really unjust getting there.
And we saw that because we then changed the sentencing amount, so that had to be... So as you said...
Appeals court.
Exactly. So there you go. So yeah, I get what you're saying. So it might be a treacherous place or a hard road to slog to get there. However, by and large, for the most part, they are.
And whether justice has been served through that process is really what we're here to examine each and every week.
Absolutely. Look, we're going to move on. Good one. Next jury wants to know this, and she says this one is for both Sean and Daniel. Well, thank you. That's very nice to be included. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that. She says, although the show covers stories from Adelaide, she kind of has the inkling that we're both pretty well travelled. She'd like us both to share one of our favourite travel stories.
Oh, you go first then.
No, this is your show. I'm going to take the time to think about this because I wasn't expecting to be included, Sean.
Look, the one that comes immediately to mind right now is a negative travel story, which is a bit sad.
Okay.
I was on a flight with an airline that shall remain nameless, and it was, for some reason, instead of having the in-seat television screens flipping up for the movie, they had the big old-fashioned drop-down projector screen. And we're on this flight, and it's full of families and it's full of children and things like that. And they announced that today's flight movie is going to be the Stephen King film 1602. They're going to show a horror film on a flight full of children. Now, I didn't have a child with me. I just thought, this is wrong.
Yeah,
so
right.
I ended up going to the stewardess and saying, look, I'd like to complain about the choice of movie. I feel this is inappropriate. And she looked at me with incredible relief on her face and said, thank you so much. I'll go change it straight away. And I thought, that's a little weird.
Oh.
She comes back and she says, we're not allowed to change the movie until someone complains. Oh. And I was hoping someone would.
Nice one. No, good. I like it. Look, favourite travel stories. I was relatively well travelled when I was quite young. Thankfully, I travelled overseas a couple of times with my mum. I managed to do Europe when I was quite young. I was 9 years old, and here's one for you. Just goes to sort of show a little bit about my personality, where I'm from. I, at 9 years old, went through Dachau concentration camp in Germany. Yeah, and even as a 9-year-old, not really comprehending the whole thing.
Yeah,
very sobering. Kind of got the gravity of it. I say that to also put on the back end of that, my mum just didn't take me to a concentration camp. She was very much a part of history, a buff, and loved art and all of that. So I got a really big cultural piece back then. So I went through all of museums and art galleries through Italy, through France. I went to the Louvre. I saw the actual Statue of David, the original one. So I saw the original Last Supper.
Wow.
Yeah, on the wall. It was actually it was under renovation at the time, restoration at the time, but I actually got to see that in the chapel that's actually on this wall. And so I've had a really fortunate upbringing in that sense. And that's those experiences traveling through Europe when I was that age. And we caught, had this thing called Europass, and for like 14 days, it was a train. Funnily enough, it was train rides. Like you pay this and you just jump on any train throughout Europe. So I went through something like 13, 14, 15 countries within this, and spending a couple of days here and going through the Black Forest in Germany, and it's snowing all through that, and through Belgium and France. So that's probably mine.
Your mum gave you this incredible experience,
Yep.
this lifetime moment at the age of 9, and you still won't tell her what's on the show each week.
Correct.
Wow.
Oh, look, why would you ruin a surprise? She didn't tell me what I was going to see in the art gallery. She's not telling you what's on the show. She can tune in like everyone else has to, Sean.
I'm really sorry, Daniel's mum. I'm really sorry.
He's not really. He's smirking. What else have we got here? There is one that I want to ask you here. Just quickly, have you ever feared for your safety in the line of your work? And if so, what is that scariest moment you've had covering a story?
Yeah, I had a particular case, and I'm not going to give the person who's still in prison the benefit or the satisfaction of naming them on air.
Okay.
But there was a person who targeted me, made it very clear in court, actually, that they were targeting me. They were upset with me. They were upset with my work. And this was an extraordinarily dangerous person. And it did some real damage to my sense of safety, my sense of security. I turned the house that I was living in at the time into a fortress.
Yeah, right.
Roller shutters, alarms, all sorts of things. I started walking different ways, taking different buses, all sorts of things to change my movements.
Yeah, okay.
Because this person had connections that meant there was the potential for other people to be watching me.
Right.
I was very, very frightened.
Okay.
It did a number on my relationships. It did a number on my peace of mind. It did a number on my sense of safety, because This person was, without word of a lie, a lethal killing machine.
Sure.
And I'll never forget that we were, as journalists, all grouped together waiting for the jury verdict on this person. And I wasn't the only one worried. The police officers that investigated were really scared as well. I mean, as close to scared as veteran coppers get.
Yeah.
They really didn't want to see this person back out on the streets. And I was grey to the palate, very, very scared, because I thought if this person gets bail, I'm never going to feel safe again. If this person gets released, acquitted, I think I'm going to have to leave the country. I'm going to have to move.
Right.
I just
So it got to that point where you were truly considering that.
Oh, absolutely. I was mentally and physically unprepared for the thought of this person getting acquitted. And while we're sitting around waiting for this, I remember Graham Hunter, the great court reporter for Channel 7 for many years, came over to me, grinned, patted his shirt pocket and said, "Don't worry, kid, I'm always packing." Now, to this day, I don't know whether Graham had a harness and a gun on him. I know Graham is a gun aficionado, and Graham, if you're listening, you're an awesome person. It made me feel so much better.
Yeah, right.
Just the mere thought. You know, Graham's like, "Just stand near me, kid, always packing." And it was just enough to break the tension and bring me out of it enough. And thankfully, as I said, that person was convicted. They have gone to jail basically forever.
Right.
And I feel much better as a result. But that said, I'm still prone to taking different pathways home every day.
Yeah.
It's just become a bit of a learned thing.
Absolutely. And look, I guess that's probably something that I've come to understand from our relationship and seeing, you know, I know some of the precautions you take to, as much as you are a public figure and as much as you have a large social media presence in that sense because of what you do in the journalism piece, there is a distinct disconnect from that in the way that you protect your privacy. So I've seen that. I get that.
Well, I have a post office box on my driver's license.
Yeah.
I don't have my street address on my driver's license for that very reason.
And I think that's probably something that I'm sure our listeners aren't necessarily aware of. It is something that, you know, as I said, I've seen it firsthand.
You've had to put up with me telling you to take different turns.
Yeah, well, this is true as well. Which I have no issue with that. It's like being my own little spy movie sometimes, which is great. But no, in all seriousness, it's probably an element of the job that maybe our listeners don't understand or get to see. But knowing that, and I do know the case you're talking about and the person in question, yeah, absolutely not one to take lightly, and certainly not. As much as we're having fun with this, not a laughing situation, and I know how much you respect it and protect that. So,
but you do have to laugh about it, otherwise you become paranoid.
Yeah,
and I can't do that.
Absolutely. Sean, this one's interesting for me because it kind of an interesting question. That's all I'm going to say. Is there a moment or a time that, in hindsight, you would have done something differently when covering a case, and why?
Wow, that is a good question. Yeah, there is.
Okay.
Very early on in my career, I made some decisions when covering a case that I look back on now as a much older and more experienced journalist and human being, and realize that I probably fed a mob mentality in a way that I really didn't expect. I'm not saying I picked up a pitchfork.
Sure.
But I reckon I was probably handing them out.
Do you want to tell us about that?
You know what? If I do,
okay,
I don't think I'll do it justice. I think you and I need to have a conversation off air about that, because just thinking about it, I reckon that's a case that we could do on the show and we could really expand.
So you think it's something we could do long form rather than just here?
Well, look, we're coming up to the 20th anniversary of my time in courts, which means we're coming up to the 20th anniversary of this particular case. I reckon it might be time to actually sit down and re-examine this one. It's one I'm very well known for.
Okay.
It's one that people have heard me speak about and even write about before. I reckon it'd be worth actually digging into this and forensically re-examining my approach to it and the fallout of my approach and also the case itself in a broader aspect.
Okay, well, there, you've heard it. I'm intrigued. I'm not sure that I necessarily know exactly which case it is, so I look forward to having this off-air conversation with you. And you've heard it here first. That's something that we're probably going to unpack. And
yeah, I don't want to cheap anybody out by not answering that question now. I actually want to answer it properly.
Okay.
And I think it's going to take longer than just a pithy answer on an Ask Sean Anything. I think that one's worthy of deeper exploration.
Well, good question, whoever that was. And why don't we just put a pin in that one?
Yeah, we'll
put a pin in that and we'll come back to it. Okay, moving on then. Neil sends through a question for you. Actually, two-parted here. Mr. Fuster, did you take up an interest in the wrestling and, firstly, quite formal, did you take up an interest in the wrestling and comic world as an escapism from the day-to-day job, or did wrestling and comics come first?
You want me to answer that part first?
Yeah, let's do that part
Yeah,
first.
wrestling and comic books came first. So I've been into comic books since I was about 3 years old.
Okay.
First comic I ever read was a crossover between Spider-Man and the Falcon, who is now Captain America. And I still have that issue to this day, strangely. And pro wrestling, well, I came in with, like many people, with Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania in 84, 85.
Right.
Both of them have just been escapes for me as a child.
Right.
They are still applicable to this day.
Well, you started to touch on part two here, because the second part of Neil's question is, who or what are your favourite characters? And he states, of the wrestling comic worlds, not the characters of dodgy prosecutors and or public servants. So that's Neil's words, not mine. But look, I don't mind either way. Either way, you want to go down that path. But some of your favourite characters?
Yeah, I don't think the statute of limitations has expired on dodgy characters in the court world. So let's move on from that one.
Right. So comics and wrestling, favourite characters?
Yeah, Spider-Man.
Yep.
Absolutely. CM Punk in the wrestling.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of the voice of the voiceless in there that I quite enjoy. Sting in the pro wrestling, who sort of comes partway between the comic book world and the wrestling world when you think of his look and his persona. Green Lantern is one of my more obscure favourites. The most obscure favourite I have, look this one up, kids, is a character called Darkhawk.
Okay.
A 1990s character who's very, very seldom known, but will probably get a major multi-million-dollar motion picture sooner or later because everybody does.
They're going to run out of content at some point, aren't they? They've got to cover everyone.
I heard some sort of statement that Marvel reckons they've got 2,500 characters that they can turn into movies, so they'll be doing this long after I'm in the ground.
Absolutely, it sounds like it. Good one, Neil. There you go. So wrestling and comics came first. They have always been an escapism avenue for yourself. And there you go, some of your favourite characters.
Yeah.
All right. Alicia's got a question here, which is interesting. Do you believe that any of the crimes you've heard have been committed or been made by true psychopaths? Now, she cites the Kapunda murder as an example. I don't know whether you would class that as a true psychopath behaviour or activity. That's not the right word, but so in that sense, of the crimes you've heard, true psychopath?
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind immediately. There is Jean-Eric Gassy, who murdered his boss, Margaret Tobin. This is the delusional psychiatrist.
Yes.
I think it's very clear that man was a psychopath.
Yeah.
You've got Mark Aaron Rust, who murdered Megumi Suzuki and Maya Jakic, and also raped a number of women. I think that man is a psychopath as well.
Okay.
You've got the young boy that was referred to as B,
yes,
the initial B,
sure,
who murdered Pirjo Kemppanen. He'd been wanting to kill somebody since the age of 7.
Yeah,
He wanted a catapult so he could kill as many people as possible. And by the age of 14, he'd actually killed somebody by beating an innocent woman to death with rocks.
Yeah, right.
That's got to be psychopathic behaviour. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind. When it comes to Jason Alexander Downey, the Kapunda triple murderer...
Yeah, that's the one.
Look, it's hard to say that he is definitely a psychopath. There was psychopathic behaviour. There was a psychopathic break.
Sure.
A fugue state. I mean, nobody can rationally and sanely choose to slaughter a family the way that he did.
Yeah.
Does that mean he's always a psychopath? I don't know.
Right.
Not to in any way, shape or form to excuse his behaviour. Because let's face it, if someone is psychopathic and can be found not guilty by reason of mental incompetence, there's an element there of they are not responsible for their actions.
Yeah, that's
right.
But
when it is that mental illness / responsibility divide, it's a very difficult question, especially for someone like Downey, where there was that element of a mental break in between a completely inexcusable crime itself. That's a really hard question when it comes to Downey.
Yeah.
And it's an easy label, you know? It's an easy label to say, you did something really horrible, therefore you're a psychopath. In layman's terms, absolutely.
Well, that makes
but clinically?
It makes it easy and palatable for us to understand, well, I can't necessarily connect with performing that act or doing that Yet if I put the label of you must be a psychopath, well, I'm not, therefore I can relate to that separation.
I can't rationalize this,
Yes.
therefore it must be irrational.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good, great question, Alicia. Thank you for that one.
That's probably something we should circle around to as well, talking more about the intersection between mental health and criminal law.
Oh, I think absolutely we should, Sean. I think that would be a great one. It's some really interesting debate on that one. Quick one here, and I've got this one and probably one more to get through. Sean, you spoke. This one comes from James. Sorry, James asks, Sean, you've spoken before. You knew from a young age all you wanted to be was a journalist. So, if that didn't work out, then what would you have been? What would you have done if journalism fizzled and failed? Then what?
James, were you one of the girls in my Year 12 class? Because that's the Year 12 girl question that I used to get all the time. But
Okay.
Sean, what if you don't become a journalist? And the answer was, but I will.
I will be I knew that.
But I will.
Yeah.
Didn't give it a lot of thought. My late great-grandmother, who helped raise me, amazing woman, she used to say, you should be a teacher.
Okay.
You know, I could see myself doing that, but it would have to be at a university level.
Okay.
I have no interest in teaching kids, but I could be interested in teaching maybe Year 12s, university students, things like that.
Sure.
Journalism, media law, that sort of thing.
Great.
Otherwise, I don't know, pro wrestling commentator? Does that pay?
Not in this country, mate. You know that. Last one here, and then we'll probably start to see if we can pull this train back on the tracks and ease it back into the station. We can disembark. But this one comes from Daniel. Oh, he's located right here in the Just Lawful studio. Funny about that.
Oh, God.
What he wants to know is, Sean, we see you on social media enjoying comics, toy hunts, professional wrestling, being a husband to the lovely Justine. How on earth do you balance all of your outside interests and the ability to be so light-hearted in those parts of your life, knowing the gravity around a lot of the content that you cover within your work?
I think I have to be. Otherwise, I will become incredibly depressed.
Sure.
And incredibly overwhelmed. And I've been incredibly depressed and incredibly overwhelmed many times in my life.
Sure.
There's a period prior to Justine coming into my life, to you coming into my life, to other friends like Pontip coming into my life, where I didn't have healthy coping mechanisms for all of this. And I honestly believe that without some of the major changes I made in my life roughly 15, 17 years ago,
Right.
I wouldn't be able to function in the way that I am.
Yeah.
It's not just about remembering it's not my pain, so report properly and process later. It's also remembering it's not my pain, so try not to let it stick to you.
Okay.
Because remember how I said to you that if you let it be your pain, you're not doing the right thing by the person you're reporting about because you're taking away their agency and making it about your feelings. If you carry it with you in the same way, you're not allowing yourself the mental space to be able to write about the next person,
Yeah.
the next case, to change channels and be able to function in the next one.
Yeah.
So I have to find that lightness. I have to find that fun. I have to find those coping mechanisms. Otherwise, I'll break down.
And I've seen you do that, and I'll be a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. I know some of the manners you go through and the time that you do take out of that to actually acknowledge what's going on with yourself, navigate that, let it dissipate, and be able to cope with that. So I've seen behind the curtain. I know a little bit about that, and I must say, I've seen you develop that over the years that I've known you too. So,
Well, hey, I'm going to shout out to you right here. You're a big part in teaching me how to do that. No. You don't take compliments well. We're going to spin the rolling train back on you for a minute. You've been part of that too.
yeah, Sean, that's great, lovely. We now need to start to wind this one up.
Oh,
So
what a shock. What a surprise.
interesting.
Now we need to wind
Absolutely.
it up.
We are just about there. We are pulling...
Tables turn at the end of the episode. Now he needs to wrap it
That's
up.
why
I see.
that's why I'm in control of the important equipment here, Sean, and you're not.
And now he's in control.
That's
right.
it. We need to pull this one back into the station. We really, really hope you've enjoyed this Ask Sean Anything. We got through a lot of questions. We do have a few extras. Hey, look, send them through, justlawfulpodcast@gmail.com. If you've got more, feel free to send them through. And if we get another batch like that, hey, maybe we'll do another one of these shortly down the track.
Yeah,
for you
let
as
us
well.
know how you thought of it. Did you enjoy this episode? Do you want
Absolutely.
to hear more of these?
Just on that, what we do want to say is, look, thank you so much for everyone who has listened either on the 5AA broadcast or through iTunes and Spotify. As I said, go there, subscribe, rate, review, all the wonderful things you can do for us to help get our message out to the podosphere. This has been great, lighthearted, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been really good to get to know some more stuff behind the curtain with you, Sean. with that in mind, next week we do start on our next series, and we get the fun out here because the next one it's going to touch some feelings, some nerves, and some emotions. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, we're about to dive back in. We've had some ninjas, we've had some doomsday cults, we've had some Ask Sean Anything. It's time to get back to the real meat of the work.
Absolutely. So until then, look, if you want to get in touch with us, please, you can do that on our social media, obviously at Just Lawful Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, at Just Lawful Pod on Twitter. You can, of course, follow Sean and all of Adelaide's true crime with his work in The Advertiser at Sean Fuster on Facebook and Twitter. And until we come back next week or next episode, we just want to sign off one more time. Enjoy our work, but don't become our work. And we'll speak to you on the next episode of Just Lawful.